all of the Gospels, we find Jesus up around that northern area of the Sea of Galilee. And they all have a tendency to look at this story a little differently than the next guy. Because, you know, if we put four people on a street corner and we look at the same accident, you'll get four different reports, but it's all the same accident. And so this is what happens in the Gospels, is you get four different views, four different looks at the same incident. And what is important to that writer is really highlighted in that piece of Scripture. And so what we see at this particular point is Jesus has been up ministering, performing miracles, healing the sick, up in that northern area of the Sea of Galilee. And a unique incident starts to unfold. And if you want to look at it, I'll be talking out of and bringing this message to you out of the Gospel of John, that 6th chapter. And so what is starting to happen here as it unfolds, you see a very unique incident with some dialogue between a couple of key players in the ministry, and some uniqueness as it unfolds. And so we see this preaching and teaching and healing, that kind of stuff going on, and we see Jesus over on the other side of the lake, and he's got his crew with him. He's got the 12. He's got a bunch of people with him, and he kind of goes up on this mountainside, and he does some preaching and some teaching, and he's talking to his apostles and the disciples, and he's doing his thing that he normally does. And as it's starting to get evening, as we all know this story very well, as it starts to get evening, Jesus kind of looks out over the country there, and he sees this large crowd starting to gather. A very large crowd starting to gather. And he kind of looks at the guys and he says, hey, what are we going to do here? Look at the size of that crowd. And they're coming here. What are we going to do? It's getting dark. There's not a McDonald's or a Burger King or a Taco Bell to be found anywhere. We're right out here in the middle of nowhere. I don't see a Grand Tree or a come on in. There's no place for them to stay. What are we going to do with them, guys? And I find it interesting all of a sudden as he's looking at this event. As it's unfolding, this large crowd is starting to form, coming to him. They're out in the middle of nowhere, and Jesus now saying, what do we do? But I want you to look at who he's addressing that to. He takes two of his key players, two of his senior disciples, Phil and Andy. He says, what are we going to do, guys? How are we going to handle this? It's an interesting story. I think we all know how it kind of unfolds, right? Huh. How does that work? How does the rest of the story go? How does this work? There you go. We know the story, don't we? I know it's chicken. They didn't make fish at 6 o'clock in the morning. Somebody want to tell me the story? Somebody better know it. Come on. Somebody tell me the story.
Jesus fed the 5,000.
Yes, he did. Jesus fed the 5,000. I probably should feed my family. Here, give that to your husband. We know that story well, don't we? And that's one of the problems of knowing that story very well. It's familiar to us. We've thought about it a lot. We've probably heard a lot of preachers teach it and preach it, and they've written reams of paper on it. We know it well. Jesus is on that hillside. He saw the crowds coming. He asked his two key disciples, what are we going to do with these guys? And what was their answer? We can't do anything with them. We don't have enough resources. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today is, number one, I want to stay focused on our connect out of our church matrix, but I want to see how Jesus connected with the crowds, how he connected with the individuals, how he connected with the community. And I want to see how he used his resources that he had. Even though they may be tiny, what can Jesus do with them? You see, that's the question. And I think somewhere in that journey, as we start to look at this, we will probably see ourselves. We're going to be in one of three categories. We're going to be Philip, we're going to be Andrew, or we're going to be a young unnamed boy. That sounds like a Clint Eastwood movie. But I think we'll discover where we're at in our journey of faith. It's an interesting story, isn't it? How it unfolds, what it does. And so as we start to look at that, how Jesus used his resources, we discover that test that was directly at Andrew and Philip. And if I may, I'm just going to call them Andy and Phil, because that's who they were. But there's some things that we need to take away from here. First of all is that test to those key individuals. Secondly, this miracle that we've been thinking about lays the foundation, lays the work for Jesus' sermon on that he is the bread of life. I think we'll also discover just how much Jesus really valued people. How much he really valued people. And what he would do to provide for the needs of those who were really in distress. One of the things that always kind of struck me a little bit is at the end of this miracle, we see how Jesus actually wants us to do things decently and in order, to take care of them, and how to use the resources that we have that are available to us. So we've all heard this. Great crowds, 15, 16, 18,000, depends on what we look at. You know, it says 5,000 men, but what about the wives? How many kids did they have? This was no small crowd. Matter of fact, my brothers and sisters, if you think about this just for a minute, I want you to ponder this, and as my brother from Texas says, stew on it. I want you to think about this for a minute, just ponder it. 15 to 18,000 people gathered in this crowd at the bottom of the mountain, coming towards Jesus. Think about this. That group of people is larger than most of our cities and towns that we have in the state of Montana. Have you ever thought about that? This is one big group of people. Belgrade, Manhattan, put them all together, and you still don't have as many people. This is a problem. What are we going to do? I find it so interesting that Jesus kind of looked at Phil and Andy and said, hey, we're going to test these guys right now. Here comes the test. Feed them. Really? Really? The crowds are gathering. They're hungry. starting to get dark. There's some things that are going to be happening in the very near future that sometimes we don't think about. The Passover is coming. Did you guys realize this? This Passover that is going to be happening here rather rapidly is the Passover before Jesus is crucified. He's got one more after this. And he's looking at, how do I minister to these people? How can I touch their lives? What can I do? So here's the test. And it starts with Phil. There's okay, Mark. He's one of my Greek scholars over here. I'm looking at Joe over here, a couple of these other guys. I got to get this in. Philip in the Greek. It means lover of horses. So I contend my theological view takes me that Philip must have been a Montana cowboy. Must have been from right here in Montana. The lover of horses. So he says to Phil, you need to feed these guys. And he's going, really, boss? How are we going to do that? This is impossible. There's no Albertsons around here. There's no Safeway. There's no Rosars. We can't get enough food. And matter of fact, if we could, we don't have enough bucks between any of us. Now, his response was based upon good common sense, wasn't it? You know what it lacked? Faith. Are you kidding me, boss? Really? You think we're going to feed these people? By the way, if you don't remember, we haven't eaten yet. We're hungry. And just to make a statement here, Jesus, we're so broke we can't afford to pay attention. And you expect us to feed these people? You see, Philip was a guy that was focused on the least. To him, it was an impossible situation. This was not going to happen. This was not going to happen. This cannot be done. And he's turning to Jesus and he's saying, boss, this can't happen. We're broke. We're hungry. We do not have enough resources to pull this off. No way. Have you ever thought for a moment, as he stood there and looked into the eyes of Jesus, he forgot who he was talking to? I think he did. You ever been there? We tell Jesus it's impossible. We can't do this. We can't pull it off. We look him straight in the face. We look into his eyes, and we forget who we're talking to. We've all been there. We've all looked at situations in our life as hopeless. You know, I think it comes as a shock to some Christians and to some people in the world that you and I, we together, we have problems in our life. And sometimes it does look hopeless, but sometimes we forget who we're talking to, who we put our faith in. Now, I want you to take a breath for a minute, and I just want you to think about this, and let's be honest. Just be honest with yourself for a moment. All too often, the real problem is not the other guy. All too often, the problem is us. It's our situation. It's our job. It's all about my bread, my family, my job, my relationships, my problems. And that's right where we're focused. I can't be taking care of other people. I got to take care of myself. Isn't that what the disciples just said? We can't take care of these people. We're hungry, and we haven't even eaten yet. I think that statement is true, my brothers and sisters, because if you think about the four Gospels that we're looking at here, and we paint that picture in broad brushstrokes and bring it all back together, it's reflected in the attitude and the remarks of the disciples. What did they say? Send them away. Let them fend for themselves. Let them go and find food and shelter. Not our problem. And so right here at that very moment, I believe that we can see the love and the compassion and the concern of Jesus Christ to those people. And he takes it and he uses it as a teaching opportunity. All along, he's been teaching these disciples that they are to become servants. And that real love and real compassion is shown in the doing and not in the saying. And he's trying to teach them not to resent these people, but to love them and encourage them and have compassion on them and to reach out and to touch their needs and relieve their pain. Whether that's physical or whether that's spiritual. I think it's pretty well said in Philippians, the 2nd chapter. It says, no longer just look after your own interests, but look after the interest of others. Make others' problems your problems. You see, I want you to think about something else too. I would suggest to you that Jesus saw the problem long before any of his disciples did. He already knew about it. He knew what was going to be unfolding, how it was going to happen, and what was going to occur. Nothing catches Jesus by surprise. Amen? Oh, come on, you guys. Nothing catches Jesus by surprise. Amen? Amen? All right. May catch us, not him. He already knows all the what-ifs, how-tos. He knows the in and outs, the ups and downs. He knows where we're at, where we're going to be, and how we're going to get there. Now, balance that all out with something we all struggle with. This is a sermon. This is another sermon for another time. But if he knows all the ifs, ands, and buts, ups, downs, and all that stuff, but he has still given us free moral agency, the ability to choose. Another sermon for another time, okay? But here's the fact. Jesus has all the answers to this life that we're living while we're still struggling with the questions. And so Jesus asked Phil a simple question to test him. And as we said, Phil's answer was based on common sense. It was practical, but it was unimaginative. His calculations were accurate. Oh, Phil, he could produce data and statistics. He could tell you a lot. But here was a guy that was figuring on the least. And sometimes that's exactly the same camp that we are in. Amy, what is this? It is. Okay, we just discovered who the good daughter is. This is not a toilet paper roll. This is a toot-to-doer, okay? I used to be able to, entertain my daughters rather cheaply. Just give them a toot-to-doer, let them run around the house. They did all sorts of things with it. They sang with it. Toot-to-doo. That is what a toot-to-doer is for, singing. But you know what? Here's the truth of the matter. I gave one to everybody here. I want you to do me a favor, okay? I want you to close one eye and look through your toot-to-doer. Okay. You get rather a narrow focused view, don't you? You don't see what's out here. Well, there's a couple of keys here. The bigger your toot-to-doer, The less you see, you get more focused. And you get a big one, holy buckets. I can't see any of you. Yeah. So what are we doing? What are we going to do with the toot-to-doers? Now, some of you are looking through little ones. Some of you are looking through medium-sized ones. And some of you, boy, I'll tell you what, your toot-to-doer is huge. But let me tell you a little secret about toot-to-doers. The bigger they get, the less you see. You only see what's out there. You don't see what's around you. Let me explain something to you. I do not believe there's very many in this room right now that's ever been in a high-speed pursuit in a police car. Let me tell you an interesting phenomenon that happens. And it goes something like this. That guy's mine. He is mine. And guess what happens? All of a sudden you have a toot-to-doer vision. And the speeds pick up, and you're going faster, and he's trying to get away, and your toot-to-doer just got a little bit bigger. And the vision gets a little more focused. 70, 80, 90 miles an hour on a city street. 100, 105, 110, 120 miles an hour. This guy is mine. And my toot-to-doer just got really big. And very focused. And what can I see? The vehicle that I'm after. Do you guys realize at 60 miles an hour you're covering 88 feet per second? 60 miles an hour, 88 feet per second. Go ahead. Let's move that up to 90. Let's move it up to 120. The average block across the United States folds out something like this. 330 feet center to center of intersection. Right, Corey? Do you realize that you can cover an entire block in less than 1 second? 1001, we're done. Now, do you know why we don't chase people anymore? But what I'm trying to tell you guys, as our toot-to-doers get bigger, we become more focused on our problems and we don't see all the stuff around us. We don't see the other dangers coming at us. We don't see the other people, many times, that are coming to help us. It can have two different effects. So we have to be careful with that we don't, in the middle of our life, when we're struggling with the problems and the things that are causing us to grow, we don't get toot-to-doer vision. And we lose focus of everything that's around us. Those that are going to help us and those that are going to be detractors. We have to keep our eyes wide open. You see, we had an individual here right now that's looking through a toot-to-doer. All that I see is the problem. We can't feed these guys. It's impossible. Well, there's another character in this story, isn't there? And that's the guy we want to look at too. Interesting guy. Phil was right there. He was focused on the problem. His horizons were limited. Couldn't see the forest for the trees. He needed to get a fresh vision and focus back on Jesus. You think about that. He had been with him. He watched his miracles. But he was all out of focus and he had tunnel vision. His sights were set low. Here's the problem. Every one of us know it. Set your sights low, that's exactly where you'll hit, right? That's exactly where you hit. So he needed to refocus. You know what he needed to do? He needed to take that great big toot-to-doer he had that he was looking through, focus on the problem and get rid of it. That's what he needed to do. How many of us in this room right now need to do exactly the same thing? Well, we've talked a lot about Phil. Let's talk about Andy for a minute. Now, I want you to know something about those toot-the-doers. If you get rid of them, you'll be fine. As a very famous person once said, trust me. By the way, that was Indiana Jones, okay? But Andy was an interesting individual. You know, Andy was a finder. You ever think about that? Andy was a finder. And what I mean by that, when a lot of people are running around fussing and stewing and spending a lot of time fretting over a whole bunch of problems, there are individuals who are searching out ways and means to take care of those problems, and they're finders. They're going to find a solution to the problem. And this was Andy. He was a finder. I'll find a solution to this whole thing. I don't know exactly how, but I will find a solution to this. He had a strong, positive outlook. And here he comes to Jesus with this small little fish burger. That's what he had. A few pickled or dried fish on a little bun, and he comes to Jesus and he says, hey, boss, look what I found. I found some fish burgers. There's not a whole bunch of them here, but I found some. Maybe it's enough for everybody to have a little bite. Maybe he was thinking outside the box and said, what are you going to do with it, Jesus? I just brought you some possibilities and probabilities. I found some fish burgers. What are we going to do with it? How many of us has offered God our little bit and expected him to do great things with it? Have we given God the little that we have and entrusted him with it? What's our attitude like? Are we an Andy or are we a Phil? You know, I've already told you a few things about Andy, and I'm going to tell you again. I'm going to just reaffirm that he is a finder in every respect. Think about his life. He found Peter, didn't he? Newly converted Christian. I'm running down a rabbit trail here. Here we go. We're going to run down a rabbit trail here. He was a finder. He found Peter. Newly converted Christians are the best finders in the world. They're the best evangelists and the best witnesses that we have. If you want to win the world to Jesus Christ, find a brand new Christian and turn them loose before some old cranky, cantankerous Christian gets a hold of them and tells them, don't do that, you're going to mess everything up. They're on fire, they're energetic, they're willing to work, and they're willing to share their hope and their faith. Oh, they don't have it all together, trust me. They don't have all the answers. But what they do lack in knowledge, they make up in energy. And they're out there. Nobody hold up your hand. But do you remember when you were a finder? When you were a brand new Christian on fire? You see, Andy, he didn't rule out any possibilities. He was out there searching. He was out there looking for a solution. Oh, he had some doubts about the value of his find. Remember what he said? Well, here's some fish and some loaves, but I don't think we can feed everybody with this. I had kind of an answer stuck in my head when I looked at that conversation between him and Jesus, and it went something like this. This is where the conversation went. I think Jesus said, Andy came to him and said, here's this fish and these loaves. I don't think we will be able to feed all these people. They might have a little bite. I think Jesus said something like this, Andy, we aren't, but I will. You put your faith into action. You've made a difference. A small lunch and a big miracle. A sack lunch from a little boy. 5 small loaves. Some pickled or dried fish. Not much, but we're off to a great start. Are we guilty of not seeing the possibilities just because we're starting small? Are we really guilty of wanting the big stuff? The bolts of lightning, the peals of thunder, the voices from heaven? All at the expense of missing the small clouds of possibility. That's all Elijah needed, was one small cloud about the size of a hand to give him hope of rain. And here was a small lunch of Fishburgers that was going to give hope and meet the needs of many. See, I believe that's a lesson that many of us in this room still need to learn today. We must learn that whatever we have, if it's given to God in faith, if it's given to God in hope and trust, it is enough for Him to do miraculous things with. He'll honor that gift and He'll use that gift. This unnamed young man, the boy without a name, like I said, that sounds like a Clint Eastwood movie, A Boy Without a Name. This was the guy that literally gave his all to Jesus. You ever think about that? Literally gave his all to Jesus. Not some, but all. I think that's a portion of the unrecorded miracle in this whole story here. It's a struggle of the inner person. It's a struggle of the inner person that precedes the absolute total surrender to Jesus Christ. How many of us have been there? The total surrender to Jesus Christ. And what a struggle it is. This young man was probably hungry himself. This was the only food that he had. And there's this inner struggle going on. Do I give it away or do I hang on to it? If I give it to this Jesus, is He just going to eat it Himself? I think this is the struggle that every one of us in this room still fight, is our total, absolute surrender of everything and all that we have to Jesus Christ. The struggle to give away all, not some, but all. So what we have here is a picture being painted of a young man, which is a wonderful picture of the spiritual and what real faith looks like. Can you imagine for a moment, guys? Can you imagine for a moment this wide-eyed young man watching all of this going on. Standing on a hillside, surrounded by the disciples, 15, 18,000 people below him, this conversation going on, and he offers his food. And all of a sudden, this small lunch is blessed, and Jesus breaks it. And he breaks it. And he breaks it. And he breaks it. And he passes it, and he passes it, and he passes it. Can you see the expression on this young man's face? What a miracle! You see, it's the same way today, my brothers and sisters. Jesus takes the little that we have and he continues to multiply it and multiply it and multiply it, and he makes something great out of it. I want to leave you with just one thought. There's no way that we can ever lose if we are willing to give everything to Jesus.